holding on to his before during the speech, but I'm glad you did that. Obviously, but since we can do to remain resilient.
The person with the district municipality program. Order, I'm very strong in business development.
Sorry. You have and I recommend distance regarding the continue the same. I'm Susan Wigan and I'm with London Students Distillery.
Speaker Sully, first, and also operate my own business, UBIC Global Solutions. I've been on the board for I think about 2 years now, so I know the changes that we'll see in the town. Participation, I think, is so volunteer joining the my name's Les, with Brandon, which was number here for residential and students.
Broadway and yard from the further trail maintenance by that meeting, I cater listen to the operation in 45 minutes. Really,
Yeah, majority salad, small business owner, who's 90% businesses in the US, also the real candidate for this riding. So I'm just here to understand and listen to see what's going on and try to connect what's going on federally to local issues. And so I just wanted to attend as a listener and start to understand where your concerns are and see them guiding. Maybe get some answers from people figured to say, yeah, I met the Prime Minister and talked about our area, so I don't get a chance to check out. Get some answers to have this sort of talking. I'm just here to listen. Thank you for having me.
I was more Wisconsin, I am Kansas Ministry Director.
Each year, the
I'm Suzanne Howell. I chair the Seguin Business Committee, and I'm also the owner and the operator of a very small manufacturing company that is having immense difficulty with these tariffs.
I'm Andrew Wild, and I used to own Bear Claw Tourism, touring business in the Parry Sound area for the last 22 years. I don't do that anymore. I look after my grandchildren instead. But I also sit on the city business committee with Suzanne, and we came up with the idea of doing something for business in the area next to the Seguin, especially opposite Tariffs. But I think our timing was impeccable, picking the date for this to happen, although we probably make anything in the future, we're going to a good discussion on tariffs, because we don't know what's coming next.
I'm Peter Seguin. We have a headshot of the portrait photography business, so the co-chair and very excited to farmers.
Hi, I'm Stuart Morley. I live in near Granville. Northbound from Muskoka Lakes Chamber asked if I could be here because the chambers here in Muskoka would like to be in on the discussions if that's possible. My wife and I have an accounting business in Gravenhurst, accounting and consulting, and my son runs a Muskoka event services that does wedding tents and stuff in the summer, and snow plowing in the winter, and he was the one that put on the pond hockey tournament we had a couple of years ago at Grand Tattoo. In a former life, I was also the executive director of the Parry Sound Muskoka Community Network, where I met quite a few folks here when we were giving out grants for technology that way. So thanks for the opportunity.
My name is Deborah Loosemore. I'm the CEO of the West Parry Sound Health Center Foundation.
My name is Bill Haughty. I'm a local entrepreneur, Haughty Mechanical. I've been servicing this area for over 40 years. And I've just come to see what I'm calling it premature feelings are about these tariffs. Seems how it's just starting.
That's great. I'd like to thank Suzanne and the Seguin Business Association for providing us refreshments. So anyone that hasn't already got something, help yourselves at the back. While we wait for Daniel to join us and provide some opening remarks, is there anyone that would like to just kind of get a bit of discussion going now? Luke, I know that you've been entrenched in this tariff talk for a little while. Is there any insights and anything that you'd like to share off the bat?
Just that I think, we're giving an opportunity right now, a little bit of breathing room. I feel like, and I can speak for the district of Muskoka, we launched a, information hub, just as a point of source of information for people. We thought the biggest thing was there was just so much information and nobody really knew what was going on and it was, engaging was different. So this was sort of a way to get people, the information that they need. But I feel like right now we're sort of able to catch our breath a little bit and what was said regarding the timing of this event, it's like really big plans for the beginning. There are other tariffs that are sort of coming along the pipes. And probably also, with the federal and provincial government, some, relief programs. I know the, Canadian Border Services has a tariff, and they're sort of a duty, relief program. And, forget the other organization, sorry, a worship as well too, with the federal government. So just a few things that are sort of, in the works, but I think I think it's good to have discussions and have, talks about this because we don't really know how it's going to affect the business. And everybody's affected differently based on whether you import, export, and how much your supply chain relies on US versus domestic or local sourcing. So yeah, that's sort of, I'll leave it at that. But yeah, I encourage people to check out the landing page that we have on our district website and like Stuart was saying, we do appreciate being able to come and share information. We're in different regions, but the same writing, but the same problems, right? So be talking and having discussions about what solutions I think is very important. So thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely, thanks. And yeah, I mean, I think strength in numbers, right? So the more we can band together and then try and work through this, the better. We do have a resource page set up on our website at the chamber here as well. Catherine's done a great job trying to keep that up to date. So we're thankful for that, and there's always new stuff being added all the time. But anyhow, without further ado, Daniel, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Or we can't hear you. Just 1 sec. You're not on mute, no?
Nope, not on mute. Try again. Testing, testing. Hello?
Can you hear us now? Can you hear you?
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Hear you.
Yeah?
Okay, Daniel, Tish is the president and CEO of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. Daniel brings decades of experience in public affairs, communications, and governance. Before joining the OCC in 2024, he led Argyle Communications for 20 years, expanding it into Canada's largest independent reputation advisory firm. He previously held senior government roles, including as an advisor to Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs and a lecturer at Queen's University since 1996. Tish is a recognized expert in public relations and corporate leadership. So thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Chris, and thanks to everybody there. I'm so sorry that I couldn't be there in person. Unfortunately, I had already committed to speak at the chamber tomorrow morning, early tomorrow morning, where I am now in Huron County, very close to Lake Huron. And it's been quite a day because obviously we had the reaction, lots of media interest in the Chamber's position and reaction on behalf of Ontario businesses to yesterday's announcements. And I actually had stopped briefly at the Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber on the way here to very quickly to do a media interview there. So it's been a really busy day. But while I couldn't be there in person, we were determined to make this work because this is really a conversation that is so important. And we so appreciate the Parry Sound Chamber's tremendous work and Chris, your leadership as well, and that of your team and your colleagues. So maybe I'll just start just with our sense of and kind of how we're interpreting yesterday's events. I mean, effectively, what started as a regional trade war has become a global trade war. The unfortunate thing about a trade war is that there are no winners, there are only losers. And a high tariff environment and this constant, almost daily policy changes and reversals from the White House, it's going to continue to drive jobs and investment out of North America, and it's going to cause insecurity and instability all over the world. Obviously, the president of the United States used to be a reality TV star, but this is not, the global economy obviously is not a reality TV show. Businesses and investors deserve thoughtfulness, not the sort of theatrics that we saw yesterday, where we were all trying to figure out what was happening by squinting at a placard that he was holding up. And we also want certainty, not psychodrama, but yet we're getting the psychodrama. The unfortunate thing is that it effect amounts to economic war, not just on Canada but to the whole world. And as I said before, it's a war that's unwinnable, right? Because Trump called yesterday Liberation Day in the U.S., which I can only interpret means liberating Americans from their own cash that they've worked so hard to earn, because that's the effect. That's who pays the tariffs. Obviously, it's the American people. And the other problem is, while it was Liberation Day, so-called in the US, today and tomorrow and the next day are going to be Retaliation Day and Escalation Day everywhere else. So, for Canada, I do think that the combined efforts of our premiers and our prime minister has helped mitigate the impact of today's announcement. We were not hit by the additional reciprocal tariffs, but we're still in very, very difficult position. Obviously, the auto tariffs, which are really going to hurt our economy and jobs of a lot of people, and the ability for people to spend across the economy. The auto tariffs remain on vehicles and parts, and it's going to disrupt what's a highly integrated supply auto sector. I think the Prime Minister's response today was very measured and proportionate. He indicated that it'll be reciprocal on U.S. cars that don't meet the Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade agreement standards. And he also indicated, though, that car parts, in other words, components that we need to build cars in Canada, will not be affected, right? So that's, we thought it was a pretty reasonable response. Um, and um, and then, of course, we have the ongoing tariffs on steel and aluminum, right, which also are going to hurt very badly. So, you know, the frustrating thing about all of this is that the our economy was just beginning to step up in a good way, right? I mean, we look, as you may have seen, some of you, that we released in February, our Ontario Economic Report. And, compared to a year ago, the Ontario economy was doing much better, right? We had growth ahead of expectations. We had, interest rates coming down. We had inflation coming down very nicely. And one thing we look at every year when we do this research in partnership with our chambers, is we look at business confidence, because business confidence drives employment decisions, it drives investment decisions, and business confidence, when we took the survey measurement in December, was up to 26%, right? Now, you may say, hey, Dan, that's not very high, right? And no, it's not historically. But for perspective, a year earlier when we did the survey it was 13%, the lowest in history, in the history of the 12 years we've done the survey. So, you know, there was a renewed sense that we'd turned the corner and that, you know, 2025 was going to be a better year with growth forecasts of around 2.1% GDP growth this year. And so we were feeling much better. But as we were about to launch the report, a couple of weeks away from launching the report in February, you know, I said to our team, we better go look again because, you know, given what we've heard about tariffs and the risk of tariffs, the threats, you know, let's look at what's changed since December. And sure enough, we did the survey the week just after Groundhog Day, the week of the infamous Trump Trudeau phone call, you know, where there was that 30-day, that first 30-day delay that was granted, and continued uncertainty, and business confidence had gone right back down to 15%, 15. And so in effect, surrendering all the gains we'd made over the past year. 67% of businesses said they thought tariffs would affect them. But 48%, interestingly, thought that they could adapt to the tariffs. So in some ways that's good news, but the bad news in the good news is we asked them, how will you adapt? Number one answer, raise prices. Number two answer, diversify supply chains away from the US. The number three answer was lay off staff, or I should say reduce workforce. Not necessarily layoffs, it could be attrition, it could be other things. And so all of that obviously is really bad. I mean, well, sorry, not all of it. Diversification is good, but the first and the third answer is really bad news for all of us, right? So, you know, I've been doing a lot of conversations. I'll have one tomorrow here in Huron County. You've got one tonight that my colleague Ali is part of. I had one last week in Peterborough, and I hear pretty consistent things as I go around the province and talk to business leaders of small business, medium-sized business, big business, everybody, right? You know, you hear about saving and stockpiling and scenario planning. You know, you hear businesses anxious about the prospect of laying off people. You hear people tell us they're losing sleep. You know, and there's a personal cost that they're worried about crossing the border. One participant last week in Peterborough said something that stuck with me. He said, I don't even know what questions to ask, and I don't know whom to ask, right? You know, they're looking for advice. And not surprisingly, and this is, I guess, one good thing, is they're turning to one another, they're turning to their chambers, they're turning to experts. And that, of course, is a good thing, right? Because if there's one thing we can do as business people working together through chambers of commerce and boards of trade, it's help one another through this crisis, you know? So I guess you know, the question is, what do we do and what comes next? And I'll be really interested in, you know, getting, you know, hearing afterwards about some of the conversations you folks have had, you know, because that directly influences, you know, the positions we take as a chamber, right? You know, I mean, with certainly our mantra right now is that because the U.S. is proving to be an unreliable and untrustworthy partner. I mean, anybody who would simply willfully ignore a trade agreement that he himself negotiated and signed and said, you know, this is the best deal ever. You know, he said, you know, just 5 years ago, right? You know, now all of a sudden it's the worst deal ever. You know, and so because the U.S. is unreliable, our mantra has been, let's control what we can, and let's try to influence the rest. Right? Let's safeguard our economy. Let's provide businesses with as much certainty and stability as is possible, given all the things that are out of our control. So we've said, you know, government should triage the industries and the workers and the sectors and the communities that are most affected. We don't favor COVID style kind of, you know, cash for everybody sprinkled around. We want something that's very targeted and very focused on supporting businesses where it's needed, right? Obviously, renegotiating the Canada, US, Mexico agreement. There's no guarantee the president will respect a deal that he signs, but at least if it's a fresh deal, it'll be much harder to you know, denounce it or claim that, you know, that we were ripped off, America was ripped off, right? So we need to salvage what we can, and see if we can secure a fair deal that provides long-term stability for our businesses and workers and communities. We need to get busy diversifying our trade relationships, and that's why we've been trying to provide resources to business in that regard. We had a webinar last week, the first of a series we called Trade Talks, where we're looking at how to, that the first session last week was about export diversification and kind of priorities for how to manage a business at a time of instability. And so we had BDC, we had Export Development Canada, we had the Trade Commissioner Service on as speakers to try to provide knowledge and resources to business. And then the final thing, I guess, when I come back to controlling what we can, it's strengthening competitiveness, right? It's investing in our infrastructure, it's investing in our workforce, it's investing in community resilience and innovation. It's investing in key industries. And I should say, I know that a lot of the Parry Sound economy is dependent on tourism. And so Ali yesterday and I went to we met with the Minister of Tourism just before the election, the Ontario Minister. We met with the Deputy Minister yesterday to review the very specific recommendations which we'd made. And we see that as a key industry that merits focus and support from government right now. And then finally, I guess just it's a time to get big things built and big things done in Canada, right? This does provide, if there's one silver lining here, well, there are a few silver linings. Maybe I'll close with that, like a little bit of optimism. First, there's stuff we've been talking about for years, as business leaders, as members of chambers, that we're finally seeing action on, right? Like interprovincial trade, for instance, right? Like that is something that would lower prices for consumers, and give us more choice as consumers. For business, it would mean more markets around the country that are easier to access without barriers and regulations and costs. For workers and talent, or businesses that need workers and talent, it means more mobility of workers around the country. And for governments, it means tax revenue that they can plow back into business support programs or services for communities. And so, that's just one example, of one of many things we need to get done, and we need to do better as a country, and we need to work with ambition. Second, I'd say that, I also have some optimism from the fact that this all now has gone global. So we're not alone, right? And, before it felt like, Trump was attacking Canada and attacking Mexico, and nobody else wanted to say anything because they didn't want to, get in the line of fire. And now everybody's in this boat, right? And so the possibility now, I think, of developing some new partnerships and relationships, I think I really do think that there's some opportunity there. Um, you know, Third thing I'd say is Americans, I think, are finally starting to wake up to the sheer scale of this insanity. And so you actually see, I've been to Washington twice, since the year began, to meet with, politicians and business leaders and chambers of commerce leaders. And, it's interesting to hear all of them now starting to say in public what they said to us in private, right? It's interesting to see Republican senators now come out against this tariff madness, and vote, with the Democrats, to express concern about this crazy direction. And then finally, last thing I'll say, and then I'll shut up and happy to take any comments or questions. This has really lit a fire under Canadians. I've never seen more unity in our country. I've never seen more engagement from, our chambers and our local business communities. I've never seen more urgency and responsiveness from politicians, and more determination to turn talk into action. So, obviously it's a long road ahead, and there'll be some very hard times ahead. But I really believe that one of the incredible gifts we have is this Chamber of Commerce network, right? Because we don't just represent big business, we don't just represent small business, we represent all business, 60,000 businesses, 150 chambers. And so that's, businesses of every size, in every economic sector, in every community in Ontario. And, by standing together, we're a force that is incredibly wise for government to heed, and incredibly foolish for government to ignore. So, the good news is I think they're listening. And we've got some openings to, do some things to support our businesses when they really need us. So thank you so much for having me as part of it virtually, Chris, and very much look forward to hearing the results of tonight's conversation.
Great. Thanks, Daniel. And I mean, thanks to you and your team for all the hard work. And I know you've been super busy, and it's only going to get busier. So we appreciate all the efforts you guys are doing down there. And you're right. I don't think there's been a better time to be a part of this chamber network for small businesses, big businesses, industry, all industry sectors, because of the sheer scope that we carry of support. So I think it's a great time, and silver lining is certainly that this is a good time to reevaluate where we're at as Canadians and trying to be a little more self-reliant. So we'll open it up, I guess, now to questions or comments. Anyone would like to start us off? Sure.
Yeah. I wonder, Daniel, you could address the opportunity, seeing this is now global, and I gather we have chambers of commerce globally. Is there anything that we could prompt chambers globally to act together to build relationships amongst each other, maybe less so with the US? Is there any opportunity? And I gather there's a world conference of chambers at some point. I think it's in Canada in a couple of years. And is there anything that the chambers could do to take leadership to try and bring governments and businesses together across Europe, Asia, all the various countries that have been hard hit by tariffs?
Yes, I think that's a really good point, and I have to say that I don't know if I heard it perfectly because the sound wasn't great, but what I understood about the question is about the possibility of working with chambers elsewhere in other jurisdictions, and I think two things that have gone really well is interjurisdictional collaboration, right? So we initiated as the Ontario Chamber, for example, a what we call chambers of the federation. So the premiers have the council of the federation, the meeting, the biannual meeting of premiers, and ongoing, when necessary, the premiers come together and to talk. Premier Ford is the chair this year, and what we invited the other chambers of across Canada to partner with us and put forward some recommendations to all the premiers. Now, we did this last November, right? We formed the group before we knew about any of these, tariffs, obviously, but it really came in handy because we brought them all the chamber CEOs across Canada to Toronto in early, when was it? It was early March, I think it was, to meet with Premier Ford and Premier Houston from Nova Scotia also came to the meeting, and so it was great to just sort of walk through a series of recommendations. We focused a lot on interprovincial trade and our specific proposals. And the great news is that they've pretty well done exactly what we asked them to do in terms of the mutual recognition legislation. So that's just one example. They also stressed how valuable it was for the business community to be united and have a voice, because that gave them leverage to try to win over the other premiers, because some premiers are more aggressive than others in wanting to do this. At the international level, last summer, sorry, not last summer, last fall, we, before the US election, we started doing outreach to all the state chambers that border Ontario. And there are 8 state chambers that border us by land or water. And so I had a call with each of the CEOs, and then we had a group call where we did a joint briefing for all of us on the Canada-US-Mexico agreement, on non-tariff barriers. So we were talking about tariffs. This is October of last year, but in my mind, we're trying to get ahead of Canada-US-Mexico to agreement, renegotiation in 2026. So let's start to have conversation about it now. And that came in handy, right? Because those relationships have been helpful to us. The US Chamber, I met with them in Washington. They've been, I think, a very strong ally. They've actually been saying publicly, what for quite a while that tariffs are a terrible idea, and so I think that's been a useful collaboration. And then I guess to finish with what one thing I think you mentioned is we're hosting on the Ontario Chamber is hosting the World Chamber Congress in September 2027. And we're already starting to market that. Obviously, it's a long way away, and it doesn't help us in the current crisis. But I think if we're thinking long term as businesses and a country about how to build new relationships around the world, we're going to be hosting chambers from every country in the world virtually. Like coming to Toronto in fall of 2027. And so, I think that'll be a really exciting year for anybody involved in a local chamber, because, you don't have to you don't have to travel abroad to meet these business leaders. You just have to come to Toronto. And I think that'll be a really exciting proposition, I think, for everybody involved in the chamber movement.
Yes.
Yeah, how firm is the appetite for diversification? So I'm in film and television, and of course I've lived through three of these in the sense that one of the dollars drive our service-based industry, of course, for film and television. So when the dollar tips, they run away. It's not good to the US. We're all American service industry really in film and television. And then Magna 1.0, which was American Pride, under the first term of Trump, and then they stopped a lot of production here in Canada. And so every time you go through this cycle, it hurts. And when you get together and say, we need to have more Canadian content, we need to create our own industry, and then the tap gets turned back on, and memory gets big. And we suddenly forget and go back to status quo. So do you feel that, like, I know there's competing economic policies behind Trump, and this, I don't think there's, even if the tariffs go away, I think this chaos is gonna continue, but do you feel that business owners will be committed to seeing through that diversification, seeing through that innovation, should the tariffs go away? Or that it gets easier? Do you
Uh,
think that?
I'm having real difficulty hearing every word. Chris, could you just summarize, do you think? Because I can hear you because I think you're close to the mic.
Do you want to come up here? We may have.
Apologies.
Yeah, the owls.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
This is really, yeah, I'm speaking to the robot. That looks like an owl. Okay. Daniel, I'm in film and television. So we've gone through a lot of we're a service industry of the US, like 90% of our business is in the US. So I've gone through three of these where the first one, the dollar got too high. So the Americans stayed home. The second one was Trump when he was Make America Great. The Americans stayed home. And so every time, and now there's a third one. So for us, it's very fast and quick. And every time it happens, we suddenly say, we need to create Canadian content, creating Canadian jobs. Then the tap gets turned back on and we get very complacent again. So we forget about it and then it keeps going. So my question was, how committed do you feel business owners are? Because I know there's competing economic policies behind Trump, obviously, that or it's why it's confusing. They're arguing with each other right now. But how committed do you feel that businesses will be to making the change and doing the diversification should suddenly the tariffs go away? And for a while, temporarily. And that's really what I want to, hear.
Yeah. That's a very good question, and obviously very tough to answer, because we're speculating about the decisions that hundreds of thousands of businesses literally are going to be making. But I guess I'd say this. I mean, like, I think we have a window to start to move things pretty quickly, right? And you're never, just like anything, right? We could talk about businesses adopting technology, and hey, technology can make you more efficient, right? But there's always going to be a curve, right? Like early adopters, late, midstream adopters, late adopters, those who are laggers forever, right? And so the I think the opportunity, though, is to actually do some, very deliberate reshaping of the economic incentives business have to invest in their own productivity. And so, the sorts of things that we've been talking about, and if you look at, like, we put out an Ontario election platform, we put out a federal election platform, and the recommendations we make to government are different in each one, but the themes are exactly the same, right? Like we say, to us, the dimensions of competitiveness, it's a competitive business environment, right? So that's like taxes, regulation, cost of doing business, keeping that manageable. There's a growth enabling infrastructure. There's a skilled and inclusive workforce. And then there's healthy communities, right? Like where, there are good schools and, and doctors and health professionals and so you've got an infrastructure that's attractive to talent that you want to attract to your community. And like, I think if we can put those building blocks in place, right? Create more infrastructure that allows trade to flourish, bring down trade barriers within the country, which again creates business opportunity, and get businesses to see the opportunities now, and then maybe give them further incentives, like look at, tax incentives, for instance, that might make businesses more inclined to do these overdue and necessary investments in their productivity. I think we've got a good shot at getting more people into, adopting, into investing in themselves, basically, rather than just kind of, pocketing the profits. And so I think that with a lot of businesses too, one challenge they have is succession planning, right? And so, there's always the risk that if you don't have good succession planning, the business shuts down because it loses momentum when the founder wants to step aside. And so developing young entrepreneurs, right, who have a risk tolerance, right? So like there are lots of pieces, I think, to the challenge. But I do, I've got to be optimistic that if we put the right structures in place, we can create the right environment. Just a final thought on tax incentives. One thing we've been saying for quite a while to both Queen's Park and Ottawa, and no one's done it yet, right, is we've been saying it's time for a comprehensive review of all government taxes and all government spending, because then the government can thoughtfully set priorities, and maybe get out of certain areas of business that don't make sense, that aren't adding value to Canadian competitiveness, which has to be the main thing that we focus on now, and then look at taxes and regulations that are getting in the way of business investment, and then have like preserve and perhaps enhance those incentives which actually get them actually making those necessary investments. So there's a little bit of a perspective, but I do think that this external threat has so far had a galvanizing effect, and we need to seize that momentum.
Anyone else? Suzanne, step up to the owl.
Thank you.
You don't have to get right up to it. That's fine.
You covered a number of things that I think are key. Now, I am the owner and the operator of a small manufacturing company. The best thing that governments at all levels can do, quite frankly, is get out of the way, simplify the tax system, and we really do need to eliminate the trade barriers across the country. If we can do that, I think that you will find that small business owners will excel. But until that happens, we have the most convoluted tax system. We have the most convoluted regulations in terms of interprovincial trade. And we've had that for decades. It's time to change. Yeah. And if the chamber can make a real impact on that in light of the chaos and the threat we're dealing with, you will certainly be earning your keep. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I couldn't agree more. And thank you for that. It's certainly consistent with what I think. And as Chris mentioned, I'm a business person, right? I ran a business for 20 years, and through a lot of, very hard work and some good fortune, grew it from small to mid-sized and expanded, a fair bit across the country. And exactly my experience though, right? Like it's frustrating and I think part of the challenge we've had for a long time is we haven't had a lot of political leaders who actually have business experience, right? And really genuinely value business, right? And so in Ontario, it's been a nice exception. And then I have to say, I've been very pleasantly surprised. I've been in this job since January of last year, so not a lot of time, but I've been very pleasantly surprised by how all of the Ontario Party leaders, even those that you wouldn't expect would be friendly to business, they really are very interested in what we have to say and in working with us, right? And so that to me is a strength, right? And federally, it's been a little bit more, frankly, of a mixed bag, where you've had fewer politicians in recent years who've had a private sector experience, but I feel that we're on the cusp now of some change, if only because there's no choice. But I do think that whoever wins the current election in Ottawa, I think we are going to see a much more business-friendly environment, and an appreciation for those who are creating wealth, not just redistributing it.
Sure.
Yeah, sorry, Daniel. There's an article in the Globe and Mail today on the opinion piece, and it's headed Canada Be Prepared for Hardships Not Seen in Generations. And I quote from this: the Bank of Montreal has told mortgage brokers that it has limited appetite for lending to Canadians working in large swaths of the economy. As the Globe and Mail reported, this includes sectors such as construction, transportation, leisure and entertainment, retail sales, banking, finance, manufacturing, farming, natural resources, wholesale trade, and utilities. We have a very concentrated banking system. If this, in fact, is what's happening, is what can be done to persuade the banks not to make things tougher, but to help business with this kind of transition.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you. I hadn't seen the article yet. I've been on the road a lot of the day, but I'm not surprised. And I don't know, like from the list you read, it sounds like that's pretty well every major industry in the country, which is obviously disturbing. Um, but look, I mean, the banks don't have a very high risk tolerance, unfortunately. Their shareholders don't. And so, like, I think that this is where there's really no choice but for government to step up and be a bit of a backstop. Provide credit at reasonable rates, to businesses, that want to invest in themselves, and also to businesses that are good businesses, viable businesses, have good business plans, but have been unfairly affected, by the current circumstances. And so, the I was impressed, last week by, hearing from, BDC and Export Development Canada and, and other government agencies that, that are there to support businesses and entrepreneurs. I'm sure they could do a better job, obviously, but in the end, I think that it's unlikely that we can simply persuade the big banks to take big risks. But I think that's where I think government will need to step up and provide that backstop to support our business community. Where I think there may be an opportunity, though, through the chamber network is we do have a number of the big banks who all the banks have small business divisions, right? Small business banking divisions. A lot, I don't know about Parry Sound, but in most chambers that I visit, you'll find local representatives from, one of the banks present. And I think even if the bank's risk tolerance remains low, perhaps there are innovative solutions or supports that, you know, the banks can develop and design for small businesses that that can help them at this time. So certainly it's something we're going to look at. We have the Canadian Bankers Association involved on our we have a Ontario Business and Trade Leadership Coalition that we set up in January, you know, to in part to come together to talk about these issues. And certainly very happy to raise your comment and discuss access to capital and related issues in that forum.
So, it's banking there. And one of the interesting things about banking in Canada is the consumer growth for customers. They noted, I mean, it's shrunk now, so the tariffs are very risk, but at one point, I'm sure they see small businesses the biggest growth opportunity for them to compete with more customers. So BMO at one point, not that long ago, I mean, things changed because of Mr. Trump, but at one point they had identified small businesses being an overlooked portion of their business because very few customers don't know how to use real name switch banks in general. So they had BMO at that made a priority like 20 years ago for small businesses. But yeah, they go back. So yeah, that's but for the chamber, like to recognize it, like in terms of their growth potential in Canada, it is actually a small business market that is a huge area because of the risk tolerance a little bit. So one of their business CEOs said they try to fight to open that opportunity to pay off for them. But you need a collective voice like a chamber to pressure those banks to see that opportunity again, even in tough times, because it's hard to your point to remain consistent when you think in too much terms, please. But yeah, that would be big push for that. And I should think there's a lot of opportunity doing your progress to make that aware.
Anyone else? Andrew.
And I'm just gonna yell, talk to, we spent 25 years in tourism, and it seems to me that even in the list that Stuart mentioned, tourism is not on the list, I don't believe.
Not specific.
Not specifically, this is where Canadian elbows up, they needs to be very aggressive. I know for a fact that the moment you start to tell people that you're being stupid to go to the United States or any other place other than Canada, especially in the summertime, because we have the best tourism products known throughout the world. So yeah, we can whine and we can complain, and I think my share of that as well. I don't have any tariffs on my business, but I'm not doing that anymore right now. But there's no tariffs on tourism that I can see because Trump isn't smart enough to figure that out. So probably tariff proof. But being Canadians, we're so nice. We don't really like to be aggressive about our problems. And when I did my business, I used to be accused all the time of shameless self-promotion. Well, if there ever was a time when we should be into shameless self-promotion, it's in the area of tourism. We are the best. We have especially here in this area, the most beautiful landscape in the world. We have the nicest people in the world. We are adventuresome, and we do have, we don't take any kind of bullshit from the United States when we're dealing with business. And no, we don't take your American dollar or the Canadian dollars. Thank you. Because we've long passed that point in tourism. So I think that we need the Chamber of Commerce, and I've been a member for 22 years, I believe. It would be nice if we could take a certain swath of what we're doing with the Chamber of Commerce in combination with Explorers Edge in this area to be very, very aggressive and to be shameless at all. I noticed that they put out big billboards in the United States telling Americans that you really screwed yourself this time. Well, we need to do something in a similar vein. That's in the United States in billboards saying you screwed yourself up, come on up to Canada because we still love you.
Yeah.
And you're gonna have time of your life. So, let's be aggressive. Maybe we've got 3-4 years to do it. But we could really make a name for ourselves.
I think I love what you're saying, and completely agree. I mean, like, it's interesting, Ali can tell you more about the meeting we had yesterday with tourism, but, it's interesting, we're all like, I came to Canada when I was 2 years old, right? I don't remember coming, but I'm so proud and glad that my parents chose this country and, the opportunities I've had, and the incredible unity we have right now, like that's something that I think is really worth treasuring and tapping into. And I think it's exciting to see just, this momentum around the Buy Canadian movement. Now we have to be careful, and there are two cautions that we've been signaling around it. One is we don't want to say we hate American companies and brands that are investing in Canada, right? If you have whatever Walmart or Costco or I'm making this up, but you have big companies that are investing here, that are setting up office like shop here. Obviously, we always want to support our local businesses first and foremost, but we don't want to act as though we don't welcome businesses that are employing, you know, thousands of people, across the country, right, across our communities. And, those jobs are really important. And so, so we're saying, look, yeah, if a product is bought here, sorry, is produced here, or a service is delivered here, by a Canadian, please support Canadian jobs, right? So I think that is important as we think about this Buy Canadian message. The other thing when it comes to elbows up is we don't want to be sending the message to Americans that, they're going to get elbowed in the face when they get here, right? So we have to, for me, elbows up is we're going to stand up for ourselves. We're going to be very proud of what we have to offer, market ourselves. But part of what we're proud of is that we are a welcoming people in a welcoming country, that we value diversity in every form, that we welcome visitors, and even I have to say, like the Prime Minister today was saying, we're not putting these tariffs on Mexico because they're respecting the agreement we have, right? And we're not putting tariffs on auto parts because we believe in the integrated supply chain, right? And we want to show that we believe it. Now, obviously, there are economic reasons for doing that and political reasons for doing it. But to me, it's really important uh, that we not lose sight of who we are, even as we get prepared to get scrappy in the corner. So love what you have to say, and anything we can do to support that, and to support you, would be really delighted to do that.
I like the point you're making about attracting tourism dollars in the States. It's also important to attract tourism dollars here in Canada, right? We've seen the stats about immediate effects that are already happening with Canadians deciding not to spend their dollars by going down to Florida or traveling to the States like they may have in years past. But it's important that we also remind folks that they should come to communities like Parry. There are great destinations across Ontario. Spend money, they can spend it here.
Yeah, we can give the French's ketchup in the industry.
It's a great example.
Give the church the here.
The second reality is that most Canadians, and this is a good opportunity, and certainly Andrew alluded to it. A few Canadians have seen the country coast to coast to coast. Most Canadians spend an inordinate amount of money going south. I don't object in terms of them wanting to see some warmth. But I think the primary responsibility of any Canadian, and I'm a Canadian by choice, is to see and visit our own country first. So your point is very well taken, and I hope with this chaos again that we will really promote.
Totally agree. Well, thank you, everybody. I really am so grateful for the opportunity to call in and be part of the discussion remotely, and thank you for indulging me in that regard. Delighted to have my terrific colleague Ali there, who's a great policy mind, and I know will be really interested in what you all have to say tonight. And I hope I didn't bring you down too much, but I do fundamentally and deeply and genuinely feel that the work we do together has never been more urgent, more important, or more impactful. So thank you for being part of our movement and for supporting your local Chamber of Commerce.
Thanks, Dan. Got some well-deserved rest.
Thank you. Take care.
Have a good night. Okay, so I guess we'll move into some discussions, some roundtable discussions. I think what we could probably do is just kind of open it up to anyone that wants to maybe mention what their concerns or what they're facing, or if they have any questions for Lee. We'll go from there. Peter.
I'm just gonna voice I'm currently in the car industry, the city, lots of focus on the car industry these days and tariffs, everything else. And one of the things that I'm finding, the groups that they're doing is, is that there's definitely sticker shock right now, and that's the way we need it, the more tariffs, the more prices. This is in the same situation where we're in public, bad enough for the automatic, industry to slow things down in the fall, not to go into the stores, we go into the building, there's ways in the automobiles, parts, so you can rent my stuff. No reason why we're in the computer, right? To give you an idea, in 2020, the average price of the car was $32,000. The average price of the car today almost $67,000. So it's double the price of the average price of a car in Canada. That's going to get even worse with the introduction of the electric car automatically considering the prices of our industry up into a new bracket what I've seen before. The common day of these things, I remember this when I was in the first sold my $1,995 vehicle way back when. That was a new car for $1,900. Many vehicles right now are well over $100,000. So there's definitely things happening. The consumers who are looking at are looking for alternative ways of doing things, of buying their vehicles for themselves. Obviously, that I guess is 10 times a day you have a used car for me because I can. So I'm in the leasing business. I guess the opportunity to present something makes it reasonably important when I'm talking to someone on the park. The fact that a consumer has to walk in now and pay $67,000 for a vehicle is absolutely insane. Start to get into mortgage payments when you're in the best of the stratosphere. Financing that kind of money, whatever the $2,000 a month. So very unaffordable, which is not a trickle down effect in the industry. It's a damn person in the industry that the consumer is going to stand up and say rejection again. Can't do this. And the added fact that there's another parent coming into play makes it even more ridiculous. And I'm sitting there myself when I first heard the tariffs talking about the idea of talking. I said it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. The consumer is dying, and the consumer can't still struggle anymore. There's a big issue about, pricing. I want more money, I want more salaries, I can't support myself based on the things that are happening, the things that I need to supply, which is one of the product, unfortunately. So I don't know what the answer is in our industry. I am looking for some sort of way of easing the pain for the consumer. Certainly not looking at someone to come along and say, okay, there's a 25% increase on the price of the vehicle again, because it's been going up radically in the last 4 years. So I don't know what else to do for my industry other than keep plugging on. Every day I'm trying to resolve situations where people just cannot afford the vehicles that they're in, or they cannot afford the vehicle that they want, and they're getting, when I get the job, I want to get to my job, my business. There's got to be somewhere along the line, there has to be someone. So then maybe the relief that comes in the tax relief from the government, for instance, HST reduction, or we still have air conditioning, it's a tax on the vehicles, we had a concern, conservation tax on the vehicle. The car itself is taxed by the gazillions, as well as the banks offering high interest rates. I'm still charging, I'm not charging, the banks are still charging 7 or 8% in some cases for your car loans. You get into a risk situation and you're up into the mid-teens. So there are things that just make it unrealistically possible for a consumer to get into. So in my industry, I like to see some change. I like to see some support from government. I would like to see absolutely a Canadian made produced vehicle from start to finish, bumper to bumper, tire to tire, and it's produced in Canada, we drive it in Canada. And we export it to other countries besides the United States of America. And that might give us some relief as far as all the essence going on between us down in the States. The only other comment that I make is that I think that we should be looking at concentrating on international markets and communities and about the things that you're doing with the manufacturing and you're so limited on. I think that we should be concentrating a lot on international markets and seeing what else we can do. Who else can absorb the things that are going on in the United States? That is directly another way. I think that we need a little bit of guidance as far as who can absorb our inventory, who can absorb the things that you're making, rather than the United States. Maybe it's more competitive than anybody else in the market. Somebody's been waiting there to absorb the manufacturing that you had because it wasn't otherwise there. Now it's again. I think things made in Canada, I think that's another point, was we should start saying, got things made in Canada with very good stuff. We should be using that along there around. Those are my.
I guess I would like to add to that in a slightly different way. We are such a resource-rich community. It's absolutely appalling that we are in dire straits and so vulnerable in terms of what's happening south of the world. We have such immense resources. The rest of the world aren't so blessed. We need to develop them. We'll also look at I mentioned the taxes to pay. Every year we're told what day it is that we actually earn for ourselves. It's outrageous. And it gets back to, you mentioned, there's tax on tax, there's things. There's the fact that the average individual, even with a reasonable income, they can't afford a vehicle. They're paying the high interest rates. They're paying on the never, which I think is frankly outrageous. And it shouldn't be.
The unfortunate thing in a lot of cases, the government, it's an obvious thing that they can tax without any objection because it's a need. So that requires somebody needs to get to work every day and drive their vehicle. So it's a little bit of a vulnerable situation, but I agree that in order to get things going a little bit more, including the production of things in Canada, you need to make our own industry work. To get it to the.
Anyone else want to weigh in? So when I was running very south, started community network, one of the things that helped a lot of us during COVID was the grant program, which was for technology adoption. So it was 50 cent dollars, and then during COVID, it went up to 75 cent dollars. So what would happen is if a business wanted to buy some new equipment for $50,000, this grant could get up to 50% of that up to $25,000. And that made a huge difference to a lot of businesses. One of our problems in Canada is we don't adopt technology quickly. And what happened is, so some of these businesses that were saving up to buy something in 5 or 10 years' time would now be able to desperate shortage of staff, and so some of these was automating things where they couldn't find staff. So this was a program administered by small non-profit agencies, and then the Business Development Corporation decided to copy and do this and made a mess and actually canceled their digital programs. These things run really well when you have small local communities running and you know who really is for real in terms of rather than money that's wasted. So those are programs that were highly effective. Fednor was able to turn on a dime with those kinds of opportunities and got a lot of saved a lot of businesses through COVID. So I think that's something that people should give some thought to. The other one is the old Dura factory in Bracebridge. Those and many other factories were done here with tax incentives. This was an economic zone here, years and years after pre all that. And my son was in China for some time. He said they have economic zones in China. There's no taxes at all. These economic zones it's created. We're trying to develop Northern Ontario, right? Northern Canada all the way up to the Arctic. If that was a tax-free zone to make it a whole lot different, one, you're accomplishing, taking some of the pressure off the cities in terms of stuff, you're making it an incentive for very remote areas to develop and come up with something competitive. I think that's something that should be given some thought.
The third one was my wife at taxes, is the overhaul of CRA is desperately needed. It is so difficult now, it's so expensive to deal with CRA, like and the Ontario government processing taxes and whatever. And the exemptions should be much higher. You've got people on ODSP paying taxes, like this is crazy, taxes never been not caught up with that. People starting a business, you know, they first started, the first $30,000 income was tax free. You didn't have to register for a GST or HST. That should be $50,000 today. Like we're totally under damaging these startup opportunities. The other one is I do a lot of work with venture capital. Government is putting billions of dollars into co-investing in venture capital. In venture capital, you're betting on 1 in 10 that might be successful. We have nothing like that for the middle-sized business. I'm talking about businesses that are growing faster, but not crazy fast, not doubling in size, but growing maybe more than 10% a year. That 10 or 20% a year, there are a lot of really good businesses that are going to be world class. They can be really good. And there's no equivalent equity support. And these are businesses that need to leverage up, so they don't fit all your bank criteria. The other thing is that the Ontario government runs the credit unions. There's an opportunity for the Ontario government to do something with credit unions rather than forcing them to be under the same ridiculous constraints that the main federal banking system. So these are opportunities where we can try and restructure things to make this a lot more attractive. Yes, I know for 20, 30 years I've been here. Oh, the big banks are going to go to small business. Yes, we're going to have a program for small business. Our company, we deal with 5 banks because we've had hell with all these banks at different times. We don't trust any of them. And we're a small business, successful small business, been around for 30 years. And the amount of our clients who are doing extremely well that cannot get a loan is unbelievable. And the idea that a little bit of pressure on them is going to solve it would be great if it did work, but I don't see that happening. We need a fresh approach. I think those were some of the thoughts that I've had.
And we also lost a local connection, right? Like it's now done centrally.
Well, and Bell's closing the
Yeah, right. Because it's not like they know you to your point, right? Like the bankers at the bottom don't have a lot of room to risk, even though they know you and they do you well. And it has gotten centralized. Interesting.
And in some countries, the post office has banking services.
Yeah.
Sure.
Excellent points, sir. Sure.
I agree with you on the tax, and the taxes have to be reformed, this country, absolutely. It's a big, huge burden on the consumer, but on business to try to get yourself a point. The regulation and the things that they charge you, if you want to snip something or touch something, it's ridiculous. So regulation and cost regulation. I don't mind the regulations there because it sort of makes it normal for understanding for everybody. But to be charged through the yin for things that are really just logical doesn't make sense whatsoever. So the streamlining of the taxes, we can, individuals and businesses, and the fact that they can streamline some of the regulations and cut out the costs of some of these things too. It is.
It's a good word, streamlining. So there's approximately like 500 craft breweries in Ontario. There's about 35 craft distilleries. We now know why. We are taxed at 61%. That's before the bottles, the label, the labor, any of that. We are higher taxed than beer and wine. Makes 0 sense.
So another one of those sectors that everyone realizes is the have thing, you know, it's a desired color or whatever, and so there's a tax or whatever we want, let's do it.
Because the law can change in 100 years. So.
Did you get affected again? Was it April 1st, the new?
Oh, well, times 8 is better.
Just to give you an idea of what can of beer.
You're not making it.
Yeah.
On the bottom, which is too bad.
It is, yeah.
It's a good product, people love it.
Can of beer in the United States, little can of beer is about. Like a pop, you know, we buy a pop machine years ago. And there's beer everywhere, and it's maybe not generating a lot of income for the people, but at least it makes it affordable, more than not taxing to death and spend their money.
So, oh, sorry, go ahead. No, it's okay, Stuart, go right ahead.
So, one that my travel folks are suggesting to us that can make a huge difference if we want to make this summer a great travel attraction is to cut the price of air tickets. And a big part of your air tickets is the taxes at the airports. If the government had a way that they
do something to remove, reduce, eliminate the huge taxes you pay to fly to Canada. Make it so cheap to fly to Canada. That's the biggest hurdle. Once people get here, it's great, but the cost to come here just is crazy. They're telling me it's the air flights that's one of the biggest problems.
To fly within Canada is insane.
Anyhow.
May I ask a question of the businesses, if they're so diverse? I'm just curious, when you interact. I know that one big tourism industry, and that's definitely said, for example, spoke about. Inside discovery and you know, a lot more innovation, breweries, prefab housing this year, like there's a lot of businesses here that are not necessarily tourism based. Do you ever find a prejudice against them that when they don't think of Parry, San Muskoka as a place of a very diverse group of businesses? Do you ever feel like a bit of pushback towards you being, they know you as a tourism industry, but they don't think of investing here for prefab housing? Breweries, like, well, just curious, like, has that perception kind of affected your businesses in any way?
It's not, it's there.
Yeah,
We don't exist.
yeah,
Bells and the lodgers, I'm quite astounded to see lodgers go piss away on their $1 billion from an NHL contract. Alone. You know, we have people up here that can't get a telephone, we have people up here that can't get internet. We have people up here that can't get part of Canada, okay, so that's not just Rogers, that's Bell, that's Scotia, that's Telus. That's why you're ready, you're absolutely ready to go. The banks, you know, I'm fortunate, I'm old enough that I worked long enough, where I own my house. If you ever really own your house, I think that's every, whatever the tax you do, you gotta sure pay off all those. You know, my kids, and you know, one of my 4 kids, or 2 of my 4 kids actually own houses or get mortgages. I always ask questions, if you wanna break a mold, and that's what you're talking about, you know, why don't we really say to the government, to the banks, why don't we need down payments? It's, we all, no one's ever been able to explain to you, why the hell you need a down payment? My kids are paying, you know, $1,900, $2,000 a month to rent. And if you've been doing that for a few years, then why the hell do you need down payment? You should get rid of down payments. I would send Trump running into the bushes. Instead. Because I think we should be able to say to people, if you can afford to pay $1,900, $2,000, $3,000 a month, your place to live, then here's a house. Now you might have to be paying that off for the next 30, 40 years. But that would do a whole bunch of stuff for our economy in terms of building new buildings and all kinds of things. And it's very radical. So Peter, I agree with you, not just in that area, we need to smash this model to bits and put it back together again. And into your thing as well, we need to figure out how to do taxes differently and all the rest of it. But we can't just fight all of this at once. We need to take one key area and drive that stake through the empire's heart. And that would certainly do it. Just want to comment about the banks. Corporations are looking at loans all the time, trying to get you with food. Purchases of vehicles, you know, all kinds of things, we have look at risk. And that risk factor goes up and down by the type of the contract. I remember my story the other day of my credit score, it is up and down. So when I put it in the bank, when I'm paying the parcel. That risk that the banks look at is the result of the economy, what we're doing in the economy. So it's a vicious circle. The vicious circle is that their banks are trying to lend money to people that go out pay their businesses, so that they can pay their employees. They don't want to pay their employees enough, so they come back. And then everything goes back to the bank, because we can't afford, we can't, there's too much risk, you don't have a proper job, or you're not, you don't have the ability to pay it back. The banks have looked into it so deep. When the COVID payments came out, like one business could get $40,000 to pay it back. One of the stipulations, and there's someone here from CBDC, I think, was that you could, you were not allowed to use that money to pay off bank loans. I go, what are you talking about? Small businesses are in low hell, and we couldn't use it. So every single business I knew got $40,000 immediately paid off loans to be able to catch me again. Well, let's do a thing. Now, why would they do that? It's racist. From the racists. People, keep that going. And what you do is invest in more business. Well, those of you who lived through COVID, the last thing on earth you were gonna do is go and invest money in your business. There were no customers anywhere. For 2 years, maybe longer. So the whole thing is cockeyed. And cockeyed in the sense of the financial institutions. Well, I think when you just mentioned about the argument, about banks and, banks have to be supported, and I think they have to take the risk away by the government coming along and say, listen, we're going to maybe sacrifice $2 couple billion to support our banks and the fact that they're going to support a high risk clientele. And I'm not saying by high risk clientele, charging 15 or 18, 20% interest. I'm saying support the standard rate, give the person the opportunity to go out and make a living by giving them a loan, even though there's some risk. And if that happens to fail, and it's probably taking percentages, you might get 10% failure out of the others. The 10% is going to make, is not going to make a big hurt for the governments. So let the bank be supported by the government to say this, we'll take the risk out of the situation, we'll underwrite the loans if there is failure, you get that risk in our country.
So one of the things that has come present, and we've had some calls coming into the church, and we've seen the shift of our local employers trying to buy Canadian. But how do you really buy Canadian? And how do you know what you're buying is Canadian? So we pulled up a couple of different resources like from the OCC to teach not only our business owners, but the consumers, what do you look for when you're shopping? And what is the difference between made in Canada, produced in Canada, packaged in Canada? And what does it mean to, our shops, our businesses here who are selling to the local people? Because we all see a huge shift that if we're going out shopping, we want to support Canadian products. So this is something that the OCC has come up, thank you. And it's a very easy thing that's, I think, helping not only consumers, but businesses learn on what does it mean to provide Canadian. Thank you, Stuart. Sorry, I'll let you take over, Chris. So this is right on the cheap and it just goes through products of Canada, made in Canada, packaged in Canada. And what is the difference?
Should we stop watching Netflix, stop using Amazon, should we not?
Yeah.
How far do you take?
Well, I think the reason I brought this up was we now here today, we can only do so much. So what can we do today? We know what we need to do tomorrow, next month, next year. But what can we do today to help not just our local businesses, but to help our own businesses? And these are the kinds of things that there's going to be lots of change. And the tariffs today are going to be different tomorrow. But these are the kinds of things that I think we can do today to help our local businesses and help our own businesses.
Yes, thank you. So my name is Deborah Lismore. I haven't had a chance to meet much yet. We had lunch last week. I'm the CEO of the West Parry Sound Health Center Foundation, and I would just like to put a few things on the table. I'm not in terms of a solution or a request, because that's what I often do in my daily life, but just to add some perspective or bring in perhaps a different perspective to round out the conversation. So I've spent most of my career, all of my career, except for probably 5 years, working in the charitable sector. And I've worked for organizations that have been local neighborhood organizations to international aid organizations to healthcare, as I am now. And one of the things that I think needs to be part of this conversation, if we're talking about the economic impact of these tariffs and the changes that needs to happen in the Canadian economy, is what will happen to the charitable sector. The charitable sector, as you may not be aware, contributes $192 billion to the Canadian economy in 2024. It's responsible for 8.3% of the GDP, and it employs 2.4 million people. And many of those jobs and many of those services are 100% reliant on charitable donations. And where do charitable donations come? They come from what's left over after somebody pays for all their living expenses. Canadians are tremendously generous. but there is a 30-year statistical record of donations in Canada. Statistics Canada puts this out every couple of years. And the pattern is very clear that when there's a recession, not surprisingly, donations drop. That's one pattern. And now, luckily, the historical pattern has been that when the recession ends, relatively quickly, donations recover. But the impact on people's lives during that time is very real. There's two other trends in the charitable sector that I think are important to understand, and I don't think very many people are aware of them. In the last 30 years, the total dollars donated to charities by Canadians has skyrocketed. It's a very strong graph from about 1995 to this year, with a couple little dips, 2009, 8, 9, drop, but it came back up. So a very strong increase in the total dollars that Canadians donate to charities. But the number of people who donate has dropped dramatically over that time. In the last statistics that I saw, which I believe were 2022 statistics, only 17% of Canadians claimed charitable donations on their tax return. So this entire sector rides on a smaller number of people making bigger donations every year. Eventually, those two lines are going to get too far apart, and it's not going to work. So I don't have a solution. I mean, I work very hard every day to encourage people to donate to the charities they care about, to make a difference in their communities, and to think about their neighbors and themselves that depend. I mean, I don't think we give much thought really to how our lives, everyone's lives are affected by the charitable sector on a day-to-day basis. But it seems to me that if we're talking about the impact of our economy that is so shattering, that as these tariffs and this breakdown in the relationship and in the global world economic order is going to be, we have to be sure that we're also considering charities, not only as an economic driver and an employer, but as the social contract that holds our society together. Thank you for allowing me my soapbox.
One little question. I mentioned this morning.
Oh, yes.
The things that you mentioned this morning are very interesting, maybe that's the reason why you got that gap now, and the increase is a little bit of all the charities, they're giving in inheritance charities, and I don't know what kind of numbers. Maybe I'm thinking of like more than what it is on that.
How much do you have? Okay. So very quickly, I was at the Chamber breakfast this morning and talked very briefly about the quest as a way that people choose to support charities. So a very small number of Canadians, very small percentage of wills contain charitable requests. It's actually very, very small. But it does tend to be the biggest gift the person has ever made in their life, so to speak, because they're making that gift out of assets as an end of life gift, not out of what's left in their pocket after they pay their bills. So yes, the bequests left to charities do tend to be at some order of magnitude larger than the average gift you might have seen from that person during their life. What happens though is people don't say, I'm not going to give in my life, I'm going to do it all in my will. People who leave a bequest to charity in their will are people who have been donating throughout their lives, and this is their last final expression of that legacy.
So the government sponsors the card that I have in my wallet says if I die, I pay my body, if I die, parts of my body. Whatever part of it is, but anyway, maybe developing something like that, maybe to the government to make people a little bit more aware that they can donate their favorite charity if somebody was something in their will. And that's sort of a common thing with all Canadians, and that might be I don't know if they do it in rules. That might make us a little bit unique as far as how we treat our charity system and how we deal with our. So, just a thought.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of things. So the charitable sector, like the business sector, is not a monolith. You know, there are many different organizations, many different that range dramatically and from left to right to up to down to whatever, and many causes. And so it is, same similar challenges, and we have our own professional and sector associations as well, similar challenges to getting the collective voice. And as I said, I'm not putting this out there as because I have solutions, I have giant questions, but I think that if a group like this gathers to talk about the impact of this chaos on our economy and the world economy, that the impact on the charitable sector and what the charitable sector means to Canada should always be part of that conversation.
And I think just one more thing, pulls us all together. It's challenge. What do you charities that you?
Just like to add, as someone who's been reviewing my charitable donations for a little while, and having been involved years past, my suggestion would be that, to me, what the first thing I look at, one, I want to, any donation I make, I want to support my local community. But I've gone through, and I can't be the only one that's looked at the overhead on some of them, and I don't want to mention any names. It's substantial, and it's a deterrent for anybody wanting to donate. So my suggestion would be is that, try to reduce the cost of the overhead, and to make sure that that's part of the information that is up there, because it does make a difference in terms of who varying people like myself would donate to.
I don't want to turn this into a whole conversation about charities, but I will say it is a very important point. It's a valid point. The other piece, I think, to keeping is not only to look at overhead, but to look, as you said, on impact. So if the charity is doing the work you want to do, and they are having the impact you want to see your donation have, then perhaps, thinking about the cost of them doing business is as valid as the cost of you doing business. And so that cost is people primarily for most charities, which we want to pay living wages. We want to have, good skilled people in positions. And then the other, we still have to pay the hydro bill. We still have to all those other costs that you see. So I think it is an important thing to watch and a thing to pay attention to as a donor. As much as it is important to look at the impact that the charity is having.
Maybe we'll shift gears for a second and give the floor to a lead for our, and give us some insight.
Yeah, no, first of all, thanks for having me here to come up. It's interesting to hear about the perspectives in this community. I actually grew up in British Columbia. I lived in Ontario for about 10 years, and this is my first time coming back to Parry Center. And I can tell you that I plan on coming back in the summer to live.
Much nicer.
That's nicer, yeah. I agree with that. But it's quick bring some of these examples. I mean, the themes that we've been hearing today, reflect all the works in the chamber. And you heard Dan speak to it a little bit earlier. Some of the immediate supports that we've been calling on the government to go and do, target support of those businesses most affected by some of these trade impacts. The things that we can do, we have a real watershed moment to tackle internal trade barriers. We know that internal trade last year, for example, was 18% of our GDP. And estimates suggest that if we were to eliminate these barriers, we could raise that by 4 to 7%. So in a world where we're facing some of these recessionary pressures, where discretionary spend, people are being a little bit more deliberate with their pocketbooks in terms of charities, or thinking twice about the car payments that they may have to go and make. There could be some ways that we can really tackle some of these problems by strengthening our own economy. I know Dan spoke to that a little bit as part of his remarks. But the work that we do, my charity chamber really looks cross-sectorally at all the different aspects, all the different parts of our economy that contribute to our prosperity. Whether it's developing natural resources and looking at opportunities to export those, to building up energy infrastructure, to workforce development and skills that you need, to making sure that we have the right knock-on effects across the economy to bring people to the place they need to go and work. So do we have enough housing up? We're building enough roads. Do we invest enough in culture and tourism to allow people to enjoy their lives outside of work. There's a lot of the macro types of things that we think about the chamber as we're developing some more places into government. But it's been very helpful to hear some of the discrete capacity of your observations and the ideas that you have, whether it be the thing that we hear all the time, tactical. I think that's a pretty consistent theme that we're hearing, whether it's through our economic report that we got every year. It's a top response from a lot of the businesses that submit into that survey. But you know, maybe we can add a checkbox to your tax return that makes it a little bit easier to bequeath funds, upon your death. We hear you mentioned earlier about the disproportionate amount of tax that you're paying when it comes to your distillery, wine, spirits. It's time for a more comprehensive reform to look at every aspect of taxation. And it's not just about less taxes, it's about the way you framed it, streamlining those taxes, a little bit easier for you as a business to understand what you're paying, and a little bit more efficient for the CRA as we collect and remit taxes, because our tax base is very, very important to funding all the services we talk about, whether it's tax credits to go and incent people to go and contribute funds to the project, right? It's all part of that ecosystem. So I'm really grateful to be here today to hear a lot of these concerns, so to some of the examples that you brought forward, and I plagiarized learning so hopefully because I got some great ideas. But I'm grateful to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great, that's good. Anyone else have anything you'd like to weigh in on?
Is it worthwhile that we could meet together like this every once in a while? Yes. I personally think it would be worthwhile to do that. Now, normally I'd say, well, maybe every few months, but the way things are going, maybe it's on a more frequent basis than that. Right. Well, it would be good to find out what's going on, because like a week from now, we're picking a new sheriff or a new scavenger 51st state kind of nonsense. Who knows? I think we need to be nimble.
I'm happy to provide resources. I can send them through Chris as time goes on. Dan mentioned that we've been convening a business and creative leadership coalition since January. We figured out pretty quickly that the tides were moving very fast, and it's important that when we have conversations around the table here at Parry, we're doing it from a Zoom call in the boardroom, the OCC in Toronto, to have conversations with folks that are most affected by what's happening on tariffs and trade. So we've been speaking to folks from banking, from the trucking association, to forestry, to every aspect to auto, every aspect of the economy that's just been affected by trade. How do we come together and make sure that we're all on a coordinated understanding of what we need to go and do, and how can we collectively put our minds together, governing for some of the steps that need to be taken. So we were actively meeting. We put forward a new agenda into Greater Board when around the announced his cabinet, which outlined immediate steps that need to be taken, as well as some of the longer term investments that we will need to be done to make our economy more resilient over the longer term. But as Dan mentioned, he was on the call earlier, we're also organizing on a regular basis what we're calling Fair Talks. These are resources that we're putting together to help support businesses, provide tangible examples from experts that know really well of some of the things we're going to do to answer questions or deliver kind of way. I hope that the environment that we're in doesn't last too long, but provided that it does, and we need to get able in terms of how we can respond as things evolve. We're here to support, provide resources to meet it.
I do have another thing to say. Some things need to happen kind of quickly, and I don't know who figures these things out, because a lot of us business people will end up losing out. We can't figure out how to get our products legally to Nova Scotia, Quebec, the Yukon, where someone else will find it and first, and they'll make it there, and then they'll use others. If I'm probably not saying that right, you might get the gist of it. So legally, I've got recipes from all over Canada and following. We're the only people that make a peanut butter whiskey. All the peanut butter whiskeys are off the shelf. We are so heavily regulated with these crazy laws. Since we are not in the LCBO, so we're staying small craft right now, it's difficult to get an LCBO. We can't send it. over, we cannot legally supply these restaurants with it. Phone calls every day. Can't do it.
It's ludicrous.
It's totally insane. But someone can drive here anywhere, fly in, buy everything off her sheet and take it off, you know. So I don't know, there's something wrong. So, and that's, and that's because it's liquor, so it's different than, I don't know what your manufacturing is,
All, every class, same thing,
it's not a certain way.
the trade barriers are outrageous, and they have been, and I think in the past, it simply wasn't considered as urgent as I think it should be now.
Yeah,
But this has been going on for decades.
One of the comments, like we talked about regulations before, and of course, the thing about Canada, they're trying to talk about making it one unified the country. The regulations are different, so if you try to take something into Quebec, for instance, certain products, you can't get into that, because they've got looking at regulations to allow certain products, whatever. So those regulations across the country have to be not necessarily eliminated, but taken out of the way so it's not interfering. Excuse me, shipping a bottle across the border to Manitoba.
that's, yeah, so now they. Manufactured peanut butter whiskey, they'll be able to handle, and then they wouldn't need. So the Canadian, like.
Yep.
And then and they just get used to the one they had and maybe not switch again because it's Canadian, I don't know.
But we now have a knife in our throat, it's really time for us to make.
Anyway, who do you go to, what do you do?
Well, she would be more.
Since as a candidate, get a lot of information really quick. It's why I have a problem asking about tax reform and that potential trade. Yes, I asked you.
10 years and they did it all with it. So we're in a different situation now. I think we need to look at this as a chamber, our provincial MPP, our MP, everyone who we can get our hands on to make sure that they are apprised of this.
Yeah,
With that panel, we have to have more meetings like this. I'm kind of really interested because there's somebody in the municipality or any municipality that's in our chamber meeting, business group is in our chamber meeting. I think that's pretty good. We need to do this more often, get more business together and do it and bring them to not into the flow, but into the situation where we can all talk about things that are going on in our, and it's important we talk about our, I don't think about what's going on in the United States necessarily, other than what it affects, how it affects us, but we should sit around and work it out. Try to have a possible attention together.
And this is not. Like. My wife's chagrin, maybe I am well aware, small business like, so you don't, it feels like I hear tax reform and interprovincial affairs, the two biggest, so I'm. They're very good, so I can give you one perspective for one place, like, so.
You're all right.
I'm not, I feel serious. See the previous team coming, yes. I'll be all to that. So I can pass it on to you, if that's okay, I'll just ask for more information specific to regional. Tax form of the rich area, and the whole platform. But I can get answers for people's questions, it's bust up a chain on you on the back. Is that okay? That's good, people are. I can say if people are asking, good work, right?
Would be helpful if we could have another meeting like this after the election.
Yeah.
Sometime in May, toward the end of May. And then we've got people that we can focus on and we say that this group all agrees that we should go after such and such, or that peanut butter whiskey, like any grocers.
And I would say if that's right, it's about the impression, because I would say now, I'm trying to get the Minister of Housing down here, because we have a prefab builder, who's an eco-friendly builder, in Asia, it's a woman-led business. I'm making a video on it to come get his attention, and so I'm just, fascinated about how many diverse businesses there are, and so we experience really that stuff. And certainly, having to readjust the impression of the higher up that there's a whole bunch of businesses and indicators right here, and so, yeah. You know, the visit and trying to get some of the. Yeah, so, yeah, it's really helpful to be here and listen to this, because I feel like we don't always know about each other. Even as a small business owner, I can better know you're all struggling, because I've been in my house when I just lost 90% of my business, and with the US stalking, filming, and television here, it's like. And I didn't have anyone else to really talk about it, so I'm just thrilled to be here as a small business owner. And yes, I am candid, but regardless of the outcome, I'm still coming to these meetings, because I just feel better hearing about people struggling and
And we have quite a thriving film and television.
I know, yeah, we do, but it's only less space.
Well, it's
Full locals that are here, they,
yeah, in the very area, we have Michelle.
it's just. Tension. And sport, like you all, is, I mean, it's. Yeah.
And it's because of that, because we're in Ontario. It's a proof of the pudding, there.
Thanks for,
Yeah, no, I think it's great that we've got commitments from a couple of political parties at the level to eliminate internal trade barriers. But it's one of those uniquely Canadian problems in that you need to have coordination and consensus amongst, provinces across Canada. Because if one does it, if one won't do it unless the other one does, then routinely the issue that we've been facing as a country for decades, to your point. So I think having a meeting in early May is a good time to have it, because at that point in time.
Or end of May.
And it's still short, couple months from now, it's definitely.
If it's extra, let's.
Yeah. Yeah, once the dust settled on federal election, but also. Provincial level will have the government will make its own speech, will hopefully have a provincial budget. We'll get a good sense of what Ontario is doing to alleviate this problem. If they keep to what they committed to as part of their platform last month, then we're hopeful that we'll see legislation being introduced to remove credential issues for the movement of labor across the
I
country.
don't know if we've ever done it, I'd love to have our MP and our MP sitting at the front, taking questions from us.
I think that'd be a great civic.
I don't know if the chamber could facilitate some of that, I don't know if they would go for that. And I don't want to bring on any party, and here they will. They, okay, well, let's do that, because I did, we had a bushel basket of tomatoes, and away we go. You're in there, I think we're gonna tell them, I think, right where our trees. I get no the reach stuff, so I have to, but I think you're really nice, sign learn that. Okay, so, let's do. People. You know, fun with them. Thank you for looking. I feel like it's on the part. That is one. Okay. Let's see. It's your mind, fewer terms of program, fewer and sounds that. Please.
Well, I think we'll be respectful of the time here, we're almost at 8 o'clock, so thank you everyone so much for coming out, we appreciate. Great conversation we had, and we're definitely gonna do this again. Late May, mid to late May. Dust settles, and thanks Ali for coming. Give our thanks to Daniel again for joining us, and yeah, we look forward to doing it again.
Easily, right, easily that.
Now.